On 16th April, Turkey held a referendum on changing its constitution. The changes were passed 51% to 49%. This video covers what was changed by the referendum, what factors led to this result, and what might happen next. The changes to the constitution removed the role of Prime Minister and give greater powers to the President, who is currently Recep Erdogan. The President will be able to appoint ministers, choose the majority of senior judges, and announce a state of emergency and dismiss Parliament. In other words, the changes give a lot more power to the President. The presidency will be limited to 2 5-year terms. The way it's being introduced could leave Erdogan in power until 2029. There have been numerous calls for fraud. Opposition parties claim that around 1.5 million unstamped ballots were counted. Others claim around 2.5 million votes were manipulated. There have also been claims that no campaign had been starved of media coverage. Since the failed military coup last year, there's been a huge crackdown on free media and journalists. Since July 2016, the Turkish government has jailed over 140 journalists and closed down over 150 media companies. There is also widespread government bans on various websites and social media platforms. There's also been a decrease in human rights, with 40,000 people being remanded under emergency rule and widespread evidence of torture. A bit of background on Erdogan. In the early 1990s, Erdogan was part of the Islamist Welfare Party. The party was banned in 1998 for not respecting the constitutional principle of secularism. He then joined the Justice and Development Party, known as the AKP. The AKP claims to be secular, however, many have claimed that it has a hidden agenda to introduce Sharia law, with Erdogan showing strong support from the Muslim Brotherhood. Under Erdogan, there's been a sharp rise in Islamic schools. There are now 1 million students enrolled in Islamic schools, up from just 65,000 in 2002. The schools teach boys and girls separately and give 13 hours a week to Islamic instruction. In 2013, the AKP lifted the ban on Islamic headscarves in various state institutions. The ban had been in place since 1925 to keep a clear distinction between state and church. Last year, the state also took ownership of a number of churches. The reason given was to restore the area following damage from conflict, but many saw this as a further case of the state departing from its traditional secular approach, like the Deputy Prime Minister and a former member of the Islamist Welfare Party making a speech that women should not laugh in public, as it is haram. So what we appear to have here is a country moving from a partially westernised democratic secular government towards an authoritarian, undemocratic Islamist one. Whether or not the referendum result was rigged or not at this stage is somewhat irrelevant. The government will implement the result. Whether Erdogan actually had 51% of the vote or slightly less than that is neither here nor there. The real question is, how has Turkey got from the position where around half the population supported this kind of agenda? Well, it's worth looking back at the country's history. For over 600 years, Turkey was at the heart of the Ottoman Empire. For most of that time, the empire was an absolute monarchy, so there was a long tradition of having a single strongman leader. By the 18th century, the empire had started to significantly decline and was starting to fall behind militarily to European armies. Sultan Mustafa III sought to modernise the army. This included the establishing of Western-style secular military training schools. Throughout most of the empire's history, the country was headed up by Muslims but was mainly comprised of non-Muslims, so a secular army wouldn't have seemed that strange. It's only in the 19th century that the non-Muslim population began to really fall. Despite a degree of army modernisation, the empire continued to decline, culminating in the First World War and the Armenian Genocide, where 1.5 million Armenians were murdered, along with many Christians. Throughout this, the military remained largely secular. After the First World War, the empire was split up. David Lloyd George, the UK Prime Minister, handed large parts of Turkey over to Greece. This then led to a 3-year war for independence. Heading up the Turkish independence movement was Mustafa Ataturk. He established the Grand National Assembly of Turkey and defeated the Greeks. In 1923, the Grand National Assembly declared itself the Republic of Turkey, replacing the Sultan. In 1924, the Ottoman Caliphate was officially abolished. Ataturk had a military schooling, so was well versed in secularism and the West. As Turkey's first president, he set about westernising and modernising the country. His reforms included outlawing the fez, heavily discouraging the veiling of women, the adoption of the Gregorian calendar, ending polygamy, introducing European-style legal systems, changing the alphabet to make it more Western, making the state secular, giving women the right to vote. He also pushed for the adoption of Western technology and farming techniques. While the reforms had their critics, many felt the benefit. So again, there is this history of there being a strong hero-type figure leading the country. Ataturk stayed in office until 1938. Unfortunately, Turkish democracy has not been clear sailing since. In 1960, there was a military coup in response to the government passing policies that reduced the secular nature of the state. Concerns arose following policies that introduced legalising the call to prayer in Arabic instead of Turkish and opening new religious schools. The government at the time was also increasingly authoritarian, imposing restrictive new press laws. The military replaced Turkey's constitution and eventually returned the country to a democracy. Throughout the 70s and 80s, there were high levels of political violence, with different political groups attacking each other. This led on more than one occasion to the military getting involved. In 1997, the military stepped in again to force out the Prime Minister Erbakan of the Islamist Welfare Party, the same party Erdogan was a member of. It's a strange position to be in, kind of wanting a democratic government to be overthrown for the sake of the republic, but at the same time feeling uncomfortable that this is stopping the voters from getting what they want. So in summary, there's been a long history of strongmen leaders in Turkey, and a constant tension between secularists, often supported by the military, and Islamists. Perhaps given this context, it's less surprising that Erdogan got into power and started pushing through these kind of policies. What is perhaps surprising is that the army failed to overthrow him in last year's coup attempt. So what was different this time? Using his mobile phone, Erdogan called his supporters to take to the streets. This, combined with the support of many senior military figures, was enough to stop the coup. In other words, he had enough support to stop it. His supporters like him for a number of reasons. Some like him because they agree with his less secular approach. Others because they have seen a rapid growth in living standards under his leadership. Not for everyone. Violence against women and religious persecution has massively increased, but there have been huge economic improvements. Between 2003 and 2014, GDP per capita more than doubled. There were a number of reasons for this, such as central bank and other structural reforms, but also a greater inclination of foreign investors to put their money into Turkey. One reason for this was in 1999, Turkey had been officially recognised as a candidate for membership of the European Union, and from 2007 onwards started receiving pre-accession assistance from the EU. Between 2007 and 2013, it received nearly €5 billion, and is set to receive around €4.5 billion more over the period 2014 to 2020, in addition to the €6 billion it's receiving for reducing the flow of migrants into Europe. The pre-accession assistance money is supposed to be spent on a range of priorities, including improving democracy, the rule of law, and human rights, among other programmes. The UK makes up about 12 to 13% of the EU's budget, so from 2007 until today, we've paid roughly £700 million to Turkey. Some of that money will have gone on projects that have increased Erdogan's popularity. This is only one part of the picture, but it's worth noting that currently Turkey is still in the process of ascension into the EU. So what next? Erdogan now has more power to do what he wants, and it's not like he was a passive character before. He was happy to call the Germans Nazis and the Dutch Nazi remnants. He told all Turks living in Europe to have at least 5 children to outbreed the domestic population, and at the end of 2015 he shot down a Russian jet. This caused the world to hold its breath, as Turkey is a member of NATO. If Turkey is attacked, due to Article 5 of the treaty, we would have to go to its defence. As Russia is a nuclear state, that would be World War III, and potentially the end of the human race. Also, if Turkey is becoming less secular, it may come into increased tension with Iran, which it shares a border with. Iran is Shia Muslim, while Turkey is predominantly Sunni. While fairly low-tech, Iran has an army of around 400,000, and in all likelihood is in the process of developing nuclear weapons. So what needs to happen? The Turkish people seem to have made a choice. They will need to now live with it, or work out a way of reforming their constitution. From the West's perspective, it may be prudent to increase border security along Eastern Europe, and reconsider the role Turkey plays in NATO. This video has been a very high-level run-through of a very complicated political situation. As such, I had to leave out loads of other factors that have affected things. If you think I've missed anything big, or have got anything wrong, please let me know. Especially if you're Turkish, I'd be really interested to hear your take on things.